Welcome to our presentation on educational theory. Today's session will cover the following topics: theories versus trends, the evolution of educational theory since 1870, are these theories really new, how theory advances curriculum and instructional goals and more advanced learning, common objections or misconceptions, and questions. What is an educational theory? An educational theory is simply a principle or a set of principles that guides the actions of educators and explains phenomena in education. This is different from a learning trend because a learning trend represents a general direction of change, developing and becoming a more common way of behaving or proceeding. We can think of trends as the practical application of theory. Without trends, theories are untested, but without theories, trends have no basis or method. We'll now cover a few of the major educational theories since 1870. First, progressivism was the major theory around 1870. Around this time, concerns about urban culture and the need to teach morals to children of immigrants and newly freed slaves resulted in a period of cultural assimilation, where a child's mind was thought to be a blank slate that should be educated within the morals of society. Children were thought to need teaching or learning on practical knowledge, and education was seen as a moral imperative in a democracy. Around 1900, a major shift was seen with the rise of behaviorism. Around this time, increased industrialization and America's reflection on the atrocity of World War I brought around the idea that education was meant to build a utopia or a better world. Learning was seen as the product of a relationship between stimulus and response and was seen in a scientific light. It was thought that the law of effect could be used to design instruction by using positive behavior systems and disciplinary action plans. Also, the law of exercise could be used by repeating skill drills and memorization techniques within classrooms. And finally, students could get ready to learn through creating a transition mindset with bell ringer activities. Also, instruction was popularized as programmed instruction based on behaviors and not the self. This was popularized through ideas like B.F. Skinner's teaching machines. Constructivism marked a big shift in educational theory around 1940. This learning theory is built on the findings of Piaget and the active cognitive research in instructional strategies and theories. The idea of constructivism is that learners create an understanding of the world based on reasoning and experience. In this learning theory, intelligence is not a fixed trait and is a process during biological maturation that has a heavy emphasis on active learning, play, and engagement with authentic problems and tools, as well as collaboration with peers. Another major shift was cognitivism. Around 1960, psychology came more into the mainstream, and schools became great places for testing of psychological concepts. In cognitivism, the focus is increasing the storage of memory for students and how students encode information. In short, the theory of cognitivism focuses on student cognition versus only their behaviors. Finally, the most recent shift is connectivism. This is a learning theory for the digital age and is focused on connecting specialized information and the rapidly changing information environment, including the passing on of culture through social media, socialization of the classroom through classroom blogs, and online classes to pass on academic knowledge. However, 1870 is still relatively new within American history. While we see and acknowledge these learning theories as part of mainstream schooling today, what we should also think about is how these elements have roots in other fields, including philosophy, psychology, physiology, cognitive sciences, and more. One example of the way these elements can be seen in previous theories is through the debate of epistemology. Epistemology is simply a word that means a theory of knowledge. Plato believed that knowledge derives from reason. He thought that knowledge is really just discovering what already exists in the mind. This is known as part of a school of thought called rationalism. Rationalism, in focusing on the thinking of students, sounds quite a bit like cognitivism. On the other end of the spectrum, Aristotle believed that knowledge derives from experiences. He believed that knowledge comes from observations and the senses. This school of thought is known as empiricism, and it's using the scientific method, essentially, toward student learning. If this sounds familiar to you, it should, because this sounds a lot like behaviorism. So what does this mean for our curriculum and instructional goals? How can we use this to synthesize a change needed for our students? Educational theories provide a more focused approach to curriculum and instruction. If we think of educational theories as tools in an educator's toolbox, then they give educators the tools, insight, and guidance to help enhance learning for all students in their classrooms. Educational theories also provide a more focused approach through alignment. Consider these two major educational learning theories and how an aligned educator would approach the classroom. Everything from the way instruction happens to discipline, to the physical space of the classroom, to the relationship between teacher and student or students to one another, to the instructional materials chosen, to the level of cognitive processing required, and the list goes on, would each be directly aligned to the teacher's learning theory or educational theory that is driving the classroom. Imagine if educational leaders would begin to align their visions toward educational theories. This could guide the action, this could guide the instruction that our students are receiving in a more aligned, direct light. Educational theories can also increase students' cognitive processing and achievement. This graph shows how the constructivist strategies seen here at the top are actually bringing about the highest level of cognitive processing, as well as the highest level of the learner's task knowledge, while the traditional behaviorist strategies that we've been using in the past are not bringing around the same outcomes. If we look at this in another way, we could say that understanding and application are not the same as knowledge and skill. While knowledge is the learning of or accumulation of facts, and skill is the ability to use that information and apply it in a limited context, these both align more so with behaviorism. By contrast, understanding is the power to make experience intelligible by applying concepts and categories, and application is taking that understanding and putting it in operation in a new context. This more so aligns with constructivism, which is calling us to a higher level of cognitive thinking. In short, rote memorization and reproducing basic concepts is simply different from applying and extending knowledge in authentic contexts. So to critics of educational theory, we want to make sure you're clear. Adjusting our practice for educational theories that achieve deeper understanding may be time-consuming, but if our focus is truly on student impact, then our methods and approach must adjust to meet learner needs. The only focus of educational theory or practice can't just be competency or making students competitive for jobs. Instead, we have to look at employers' push for soft skills as evidence that the banking system of education that we've ascribed to in the past is simply not sufficient. And finally, educational theory can't just be seen as not useful in practice, because educational theory and cultural theses impact every classroom whether or not we acknowledge it. At this time, we would allow you to ask questions and hope that you will contact us via the contact information here. And we'd also like to provide you with our references and the link for our graphics. And we thank you again for your time.